I'm sure you've been watching many videos about moving to or living in the Boise, Idaho area and have learned all about the great communities, the weather, and the cities of the Treasure Valley. But there is one very important question we get asked all of the time, especially given recent fires and flooding across the nation. One that could be the key factor in determining whether or not you decide to move here. And that is, what can I expect for home insurance in Idaho? So even if you already are a homeowner in Idaho, I encourage you to watch and share today's video, as even the locals have questions such as, what is happening with our Idaho Homeowners Insurance? Will rates be going up? Are there insurance companies that will back out of Idaho? And we'll go over House Bill 117, which also has to do with insurance in Idaho, and we will answer many more questions. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Summer Aston, a realtor in the beautiful Boise, Idaho area. And of course, we are here to help you move to the area, but we want to make sure we provide you with information to help you make an educated decision about your move. So today we are with my friend, Sharon Summers.
Hi.
Who is a licensed insurance sales professional with Allstate here in the Boise area, and she is going to help answer all of our insurance questions. So Sharon, in the past, when I would have phone calls from people asking about how homeowners insurance works in Idaho, generally I would tell them just kind of what to expect with the cost. But now with everything that's going on, it seems like there are some changes coming to Idaho, also with just some kind of national things going on in the insurance industry. So this conversation is a lot for me as well, so I know how to educate my clients on what to expect and if any of these things that are going on are going to start affecting Idaho. So let's start with something kind of easy. Let's just talk about the general costs of home insurance in Idaho. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, if you bought a $400,000 house or an $800,000 house, what can somebody expect for just general home insurance?
So if you're in an in-town area that doesn't have high risk, new construction, you might get still a premium that's maybe $800 to maybe $1,200 for something that's $400,000. It'll have other coverages attached to that as well. But
Right.
If you're in a higher risk area, you know, you could be talking $1,200 upwards to $3,000.
Okay.
So it really just depends on where it is, but there is still affordable insurance in the valley.
Right. So generally when you talk to people that are calling you from out of state, especially more expensive states like California, and they're getting quotes, are you hearing them saying like, oh wow, this is much less than I expected? Or,
You know, I think some people, just because of where they are thinking that they feel really good about the rate,
right.
the premiums.
Right.
You know, some people just think because they're coming to Idaho that they're going to just get a bargain.
Like dirt cheap.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
not realistic.
Yeah.
So
we have that with some home shoppers too.
Yeah.
They're like, it's Idaho, the house should be $100,000.
Exactly. But, you know, I still think it's actually quite affordable for the majority of the homes. So
Right. So then what about, I know it varies greatly, but what about like an $800,000 to $1 million house? What would be an expected premium on
probably
that?
in the valley, and it really depends again where it is. But, you know, if you're in Boise, generally it might be a little bit less than if you're in Eagle or Star, or, you know, so there's different areas. But for probably that level, I'm thinking the last one that I did that wasn't anything special high risk, it probably was more like $1,500 a year.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's so many factors that play into
Right.
it, but I think that wouldn't be an unreasonable number to start with.
Expect, yeah. So just for reference, I live in a home that's worth about $600,000 or $625,000, and our premium and we don't have any like extra special risks with where we live, and I think I'm not exactly sure, but I think my premium is between $1,000 and $1,200 a year. Could be closer to $1,000. I have had clients who have gotten premiums less than that for about this price of home, and more than that. So obviously, like she's saying, it depends on other factors.
Yeah. And I live in Avamore, which is in the foothills I pay more. I pay more. So I'd say the value is probably just similar, a little bit higher than what Summers is. And we took an increase because of where we are. So,
Okay.
you know, I probably am at 1,600 right now.
Okay. So we'll come back to that in a
Mhm.
second, talking about why it's a little more expensive in the foothills or closer to the river. So back to just the rate in general. Did you see those rates rise quite a bit in 2024? Just for everyone?
Everybody got an increase in
Okay.
2024. And then it just depended, of course, on your risk, what that level increase was.
So did that increase that you're talking about come from the effects of the natural disasters all over the country, or what causes, I mean, I know over time because of inflation and because of the cost of building materials, of course the rates are going to go up, but how much of it do you think was due to that versus due to absorbing the costs of these natural disasters?
You know, we all know these, you know, across the states, companies, they have to make adjustments when they have those big losses. So I know a small amount is based on that, but I think the majority is they sit and they reevaluate the risk in our area, and then the actuaries, the guys that, you know, come up with these numbers, they're going to go in and give, you know, updated rating information of what they think it should be in our area. So it's a small portion national, it's a larger portion, you know, updated risk in our area.
Okay, so a larger portion is just going to be like you live in Avamore, you live in the foothills, and inflation and cost of building materials went up this much.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's how much your rate's going to go up. Not so much like, hey, we had all these fires in California. Now Allstate or whatever insurance company you're with has to charge everybody that they all work with more to cover that.
Yeah. I mean, there is definitely some of that.
Okay.
I mean, they have to. I mean, it is a business.
Right.
As much as we don't want to think about it, they do have to make a profit. So there is some of that, but I really feel like the majority of it is still our local risk that they base it on.
So we don't have to worry about things like tornadoes, hurricanes, and I mean, to some extent a little bit of fire and flooding, but not so much like a lot of other states do. But like I was saying, there are a couple areas we do need to worry about some fires and flooding. So let's start by talking about the flooding. So where are those main areas where people might need to carry extra flood insurance here?
So in Idaho, it's just rivers. It's about the rivers. So, you know, in Boise area, we're talking Boise River. So all through Boise, Eagle, you know, there's actually, you know, I couldn't give you a number, but there's quite a few homes that are affected by flood. They are different degrees, of course, and some are going to be possibly a 30-year flood area, and mostly you just need to see what zone you're in. I think they call them zones, but and really the people that are going to know that are the builders.
Yeah.
You know, your mortgage company you're going with.
Okay.
They're going to know that because if you're in an actual flood zone that's severe enough, they're going to require you to have that.
Right, yeah.
So
I usually counsel my clients when we're looking at homes by the river, I usually counsel them to go look at the FEMA flood maps online. I don't know how much that directly correlates to what they're going to be charged, but at least it's one thing to know before you put an offer in on a house. So by the time they call you, so let's say I have a client that buys a home close to the river, and when they call you guys for a quote and you look it up, you'll be able to tell if they have to carry that flood insurance, or that really comes through the lender.
It more comes through the lender. If it's existing home, check with that homeowner. We have done policies for people that we couldn't see anywhere on a listing or anything that would have indicated it was in a flood zone.
Right.
And then they have purchased the home and then all of a sudden are shocked because they have to carry flood insurance. To me, it's common sense.
Right.
If you're near the river, then it's something you probably ought to investigate.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. I mean, our river, we have a dam, and I've lived here over 20 years. There have been times where anyone whose homes are right along the river, in certain areas, the water might be coming up to their back door. And that just happens when we have, a heavy snow year, and then it gets really warm really fast. And so it melts fast, and they have to let water out of the reservoir. But, knock on wood, in the 22 years we
yeah.
lived here, there's never been any like catastrophic flooding or anything like that. Um, but it sounds like the place to start if you're considering a home on the river and wondering about that flood insurance is to give the address to your lender and let them do the work and make sure, maybe before you put the offer in or during your inspection time frame, that they know if you're going to need it. And then you can tell your insurance professional, yes, we need to carry it. How much is it going to cost? Do you have any way of kind of giving a general idea of how much flood insurance costs?
I know I was talking to Amy, my agent, and she had done one recently for somebody that had just under 700,000 for their dwelling.
Okay.
Coverage maybe just under 400,000 for their contents, and it was written with a private company, not directly through FEMA, and it was
Okay.
probably about $1,000.
A year
Yes,
for the
for
extra
a
flood
year.
insurance.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
yeah.
not bad if you
I didn't
live
think
pretty
that one
close
was
to the
horrible
river.
because I've
Yeah.
heard way worse. I've heard $1,000 through a FEMA policy for as low as 250,000 of coverage on your home.
Okay.
So it can fluctuate a lot, and again, it depends on what floodplain you're in,
Okay.
and then are you, being able to get something through a private company
Right.
or directly through FEMA. And I know my agent, if somebody thinks they might be, she can put that information in, and
Okay.
she can see what zone they're in.
Okay. And so generally speaking, then if someone needs flood insurance, they get their basic homeowners insurance through Allstate or whatever company they're going with. And then that extra, do they call it a rider? Or I don't know what they
It's
call it.
a whole separate policy.
It's a whole separate policy, and that typically they work through Allstate, but it doesn't come
Yeah.
from Allstate. It comes
Yes.
from FEMA or a private place.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and again, you just have to be cautious based on your risk tolerance. There are a lot of builders here who, and this is normal practice, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but if they're building close to the river, they bring in a lot of fill dirt so that they raise that whole subdivision enough so that it's out of what FEMA would claim is the flood range. But I mean, like you said, if I'm building a house that is within, I don't know, a quarter-mile distance or whatever from the river,
Yeah.
even if the builder or the flood maps and your lender say no, it doesn't need flood insurance, it's probably worth looking into, you know?
And that elevation is super important, so which is why they're doing that. But you may actually have to go pay a surveyor to get, to do an elevation
Certification.
certificate for you. So then you can take it and prove that you're high enough so that you really
Right.
don't need it. You don't fit in that
Yeah.
same zone anymore.
Yeah.
And so, it costs a little bit of money to do that, but it could save you a lot of money
Right.
in the end run.
Yeah, we mostly the builders do provide that. So I did have somebody purchase a house that needed an elevation certificate, and the builder provided it. It was a brand new subdivision, so it was kind of last minute, made us a little stressed, but yeah, he did provide that for my client at that time. All right, so switching gears to fire insurance. I know that the biggest risk for fire generally in our area is going to be anywhere in the foothills. So a lot of those popular communities, you're going to have Hidden Springs, Cartwright Ranch, Avamore, Valnova, the big new community that's coming to Star is in the foothills, will have more fire risk. Some of those Hillsdale Estates and Star, possibly some areas in Middleton that are up in the higher foothill mesa area. So are there any other areas of our valley that the insurance companies consider a higher fire risk?
Actually, at the east side.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're in 83716 zip
Oh.
code, yes, that could be. We had that fire last year,
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
People were actually evacuated.
Yeah.
So,
I had a client whose house was like overlooking that fire.
yeah, so that area definitely has been considered a higher risk.
So now, because that whole northeast side, I think that was Harris Ranch area, because they had that fire, no homes were damaged or anything. Will their insurance rates go up because they are like, hey, you're a bigger risk now that there's been a fire there?
Um, they're definitely going to see a higher rate.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
So, and we're already feeling it.
Oh, okay.
So
tell me a little bit about the fire insurance then. So typically it's not like flood insurance, right? You don't, kind of get a separate policy like we were talking about with flood insurance.
right.
It's included in your home, and so you would just see a higher rate. And
Yes.
how do the insurance companies decide that you're a higher risk, that you live in a higher risk area, so they're going to charge you more for fire insurance?
In our area, mostly it's foothills. So if
Yeah.
you're near open, grassy areas, sagebrush, those areas are definitely going to be considered higher risk. Of course, going further north and getting into the forest and the trees, those are going to be next level higher
Okay.
risk.
So if people, have you written much for people that live in Garden Valley or Crouch? Do they have even higher rates on fire insurance compared to foothill people? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, most definitely. So I just wrote a policy for a gentleman who's in Garden Valley,
Okay.
and he has, his property's good as far as distance around him, being
Right.
clear, things like that. He actually came to us because after 10 years of being with his company, he did have a large claim, and they are non-renewing him.
Oh, okay.
So we were able to write it.
Okay.
It was spendy.
Right.
So in his situation, it was about $6,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there were other places that weren't willing to write him, it sounds
Oh,
like.
absolutely.
So
So you get to
guys
that
did.
point and you're
Yeah.
thinking, I need to get insurance.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay that. Ironically, on his house, we will always do an exterior inspection look on these properties. They decided not to do a physical look on this one, so there must have been enough other indicators
Right.
that showed that risk wasn't something that they needed to actually physically go out and take photos of.
So most insurance companies, it sounds like, if they think your house has a fire risk or just automatically, they know you're living in Avamore, then they're going to send out somebody possibly to do an inspection. When does that happen? So let's say, obviously, for my purposes, if I'm helping somebody buy a house, we want to make sure that they have done all their due diligence, that there's no surprises. So when they're getting that insurance quote, at what point can that person come out and, do the inspection?
So they will not do an inspection until that policy is bound. So sometimes it's literally going to be an aerial inspection. And
Okay.
If they don't see anything of concern, then they may not do a physical inspection.
Okay.
In some areas, they just know
Right.
they're going to automatically go out.
And what are some of the things they're looking for?
Brush, so tall native grasses. If you're in an area that has a lot of pine trees, if you have packed down, built up pine needles on the ground within a certain distance of your house, they're going to ask for that to be, cleaned up.
So if there needs to be a change, you need to get a shrub away from the house, or there's no pine needles in Avamore, but you need to get pine needles swept away, or whatever it is they need. Is that something that has to be done and proven to them that it's done before the house closes?
No.
Okay.
Because they bind the policy, so they're affording you that coverage immediately.
Right. Okay.
But then if they see a concern, depending on where it is and how quickly they get that inspection done, you could have anywhere between 45 days and a year to get those concerns fixed, addressed. show photo documentation that it's been taken care of.
And in the meantime, you still are covered by your fire insurance.
Yes.
But then they might drop it
Yes.
so because it's not a separate policy, if they dropped you, they would drop the entire
Yes.
policy if you didn't do the maintenance items that they wanted to keep the house.
Definitely.
I mean, and it's in your best interest, right? Because it's making your house safer for you as well.
Yeah, and I think about it all the time because I get people that say, well, we're in this area and we like all these trees because we like the privacy and we like, which is understandable, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you do have to realize that you're accepting more risk of your home possibly burning because, you haven't given that proper clearing. 100 feet is generally what they ask, and it doesn't mean you have to have 100 feet of bare space all around you.
Yeah.
It means that you don't have those tall, dry native grasses. If you have a lot of trees, they'll say cut the ones within 100 feet. No limbs lower than 6 feet.
Something like that.
No big clusters of little trees or bushes that, can make a really hot fire, no firewood stacked against your home.
We should make a separate video on how to fire, not proof, but just help fire resistance your household, right? Because I don't, I happen to have big ponderosa pines behind my house. And I didn't even think about them until these last fires in California. And I was like, those are they do drop a lot of pine needles.
Yeah.
So.
And for your area, that wouldn't be a concern.
We don't live in a risky area. But it's something to think about.
I know where I live, I just have grassy hillside behind me. Right. And I knew that was going to be an issue if they were allowed to, grow tall and dry. And I know our homeowners association, we have an agreement that they will mow that down within a certain distance.
Does anyone get any type of discount or maybe even a little lower rate when they live in a fire-wise community? Like Avamore is a fire-wise community, so the HOA has fire-wise requirements for your landscaping.
I don't know that it's going to make a big difference. I mean, I think that's all taken into account. In your specific area. For instance, we're going to probably pay a little less. I mean, we're definitely going to pay less than somebody who's in Garden Valley.
So, and just in general, I have a video about flooding and fires. I can link that down below. But you hate to say anything, but normally we don't have a huge fire risk in our foothills. So yes, we do have fires in the foothills. I can put a little video over this while I'm talking about a recent fire we had in the foothills right by my house. But because of the type of brush that we have, and we don't have a lot of structures, we don't have big trees, normally they get it under control very quickly, and we have the resources, we have the water. So it's not that it's not a concern if your home backs right up to the grassy foothills. But typically, even when we have really hot, windy, dry conditions, we just don't have the right fuel type to just really come wash through a neighborhood. Yeah. So, I don't want people to get really worried that they would be moving to Boise and kind of, moving into a fire-prone area. But, just to give some context on that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a little fire that came down towards Avamore last year, and we could see it. Honestly, it was nothing that I really worried about.
Right.
And they did get it out really quickly. Again, the reason why the risk is higher is because in certain conditions that could have been a different situation. Right. But I grew up in Sonoma, California, and I went down after those terrible fires in Santa Rosa area, that whole area. And I mean, there's fuel everywhere. Right. There is fuel everywhere. Everything's so overgrown. Right. Everything's so, over the power lines. It was just, the conditions were just right.
Right. Yeah.
for disaster.
Yeah. Some people complain that Boise in the foothills doesn't have enough, vegetation and trees, but when it comes to fire, I guess it's a blessing, to not have quite as much. Okay, so as far as I know, I haven't heard about too many people getting suddenly dropped, and to be honest, I do not know all the ins and outs and political reasons why this happens in some states. I've had several people that are considering moving to Boise call me, and that's kind of their main, like their last straw about California. They're like, I just got dropped from my home insurance. I can't find anybody to cover me. I don't even live in a fire prone area. I don't know why this is happening. I'm sick of it. I'm moving to Idaho. So is that type of scenario happening here?
It is actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know that in our neighborhood, a large company pulled out about a year and a half ago. So they're not going to insure in our area anymore. I had just talked to a friend who works for another large insurance company actually yesterday, and she had told me that there are certain zip codes and areas that they're not going to write.
And is that typically related to fire?
Yes.
Okay.
It's all with Idaho, it's fire. That's our really only major. I mean, the flood is more isolated. Fire, that's what it is. So I was really surprised to hear that this other company had just said, yeah, we're not going to cover these certain areas. We have a company that we can write insurance with in our Allstate office that has always been our fallback when we have one that's in a hard area. They sent us a list the end of December of a huge number of zip codes they will not currently write insurance for.
Okay.
And so they were the ones that saved us, and now we don't have that to fall back on.
Okay.
And I guess the high point on this is Allstate is not doing that.
Okay.
So you may pay a higher rate. However, you can get insurance.
Yeah.
They will cover you. They'll cover you in a loss. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little, worrisome. So it's triggered in that instance then, in the beginning of this conversation we were talking about largely insurance rates go up from local conditions and, building cost inflation a little bit from what's going on in the rest of the world, the, country.
Yeah.
But it sounds like when people might be getting dropped in fire prone areas, it's a larger corporation's decision that is more so based on what they've had to cover in other states.
It may be. They want to minimize the risk.
Okay.
So I'm sure that's a factor.
Right.
It has to be a factor.
So for my clients then, it would be wise if they were considering a home in the foothills or an area that's more fire prone to, make sure that maybe before you make an offer, but at least during that due diligence time period, to call the insurance companies, give them the address and say, would you insure on this? And just make sure you know that, so that once you're under contract and your earnest money is non-refundable, you don't get stuck with like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go to here or here, and it's much more than I wanted to pay. Or you don't qualify for the loan because the insurance is too expensive.
And I've had that happen. So I probably a year ago had a real estate agent call us and say, this deal is going to fall through if we can't get insurance on this house. And I was surprised they couldn't find anything at that point, because I went in and did a quote and looked at the area, and I said, Allstate doesn't have a problem with this.
Okay.
It was expensive. It was a very large home, and it was in Garden Valley. And of course, to compound the issues on this, is it was a secondary home.
Oh yeah.
So you're considered a different risk when it's a secondary. But Allstate had no problem writing it. It was spendy, but
they got it.
They got it.
All right. So a little bit of a shift from the fire and flood, more to just kind of normal, typical insurance situations. It seems like in the realtor world and my network, people have been talking about having more people when they're going to get home insurance, that they're getting denied because of past claims. seems like this is happening a little bit more often. Are they getting a little bit more strict on that as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. You really have to change your thinking as to what insurance is there for in a claim situation. Um, it really is not a home warranty plan.
Right.
So if you have two of the same type of claim in 5 years that isn't natural disaster, you're probably going to have a difficult time finding any insurance.
Okay. So like if you have a leaky dishwasher
Mm-hmm.
and it leaks once and then it's $2,000 of flooring and you know make a
Make
claim,
that claim.
and then it happens again and you make the claim again,
Then don't,
yeah.
hopefully you can stay where you're at,
Yeah.
but don't go looking for insurance at that point.
Is there a time limitation on that? Like if they
5 years is what we look
Okay.
at.
Okay.
I did have my friend who works for this other big company tell me that they are now looking at 7 years.
Oh, okay.
So it
Gosh.
changes.
It's like a bankruptcy
But
almost.
yeah, I mean, it just breaks my heart when I see somebody who is looking for insurance and we pull up that claim history and I see a $500 claim.
Right.
They got paid out $500,
Oh.
and I will see a $1,200, and so I will see
Right.
like 4 small claims, and
Then they
you know they're they're uninsurable at that point. And you know if they had only maybe called their agent and gotten a little education
Right.
to begin with, maybe they wouldn't have put in those small claims.
Right.
So I think that's why it's so important to have an agency you can call and get that advice
Right.
on.
Like a human person.
Yes, a real
Not an
person.
AI bot voice.
Absolutely, absolutely. It makes such a difference. This other company that we write with that was helping us in those situations, they were only looking at 3 years.
Oh,
And
okay.
so sometimes that would be our fallback
Okay.
on these people. But sometimes you can get exceptions with insurance companies, certain insurance companies. You have to provide lots of documentation that problem's been taken care of. People don't quite understand that claim, how it works. The claim isn't on your property. The claim is on you. So you
Okay.
could live in 3 different homes in 5 years. You could have a claim on each home. It doesn't matter. All 3 of those claims are going to count on you, on your record.
Or maybe even that's, something I could counsel my clients on, to have once a year or once every 2 years, have the home inspector come and do a full home inspection. I guess I can kind of see the point of view that it is our responsibility as homeowners to be doing the deferred maintenance, right? So if we're doing the deferred maintenance, then hopefully you can avoid some of these things.
Right.
So that's something to think about for sure.
Right.
Okay, so very recently there was an article I saw on Boise Dev, which is a great thing to subscribe to, boisedev.com. It gives all the Boise development news, plus all kinds of other news, very unbiased. It's great. And they had one about what they're calling House Bill 117. So I'm going to leave a link to that article down below in case you want to investigate that a little bit. But what they reported was that if that House bill is passed into law, the act would create a board to oversee a wildfire mitigation and stabilization pool, including a fund to assist property owners with protecting their properties against wildfire risk. In turn, such mitigation could reduce the cost of property insurance and help retain insurers in Idaho. That's what the text of the bill says. So, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It sounds like there's people that are opposing it and people that are supporting it as well. Do you just, in general, do you know anything about this? Is this a good idea, bad idea? Just, I don't know. What are you hearing in the insurance industry about this bill for Idaho?
So, and I just read the article
Okay.
just to kind of see what it was about. My impression of it, I think it could be a good thing. I know in the state of Idaho, we don't like we don't like passing a lot of bills that are going to be costing all of us taxpayers a lot more money.
Right.
So I think they probably want to be really cautious about that.
And how it's funded.
Exactly.
Will be a big part.
Exactly. Where does that money come from? I thought about mitigation sounds awesome to me, but
Okay.
what is that? How is that actually going to be implemented? Is it going to be for your average home owner that
Right.
they can go in and apply for something and they're going to take care of some of their, concerns that they can't do themselves as far as trees, brush,
Right.
bush, or is it going to be more in a general sense? That's
Yeah.
kind of what I was wondering how they're going to do it. Is it would be fabulous if somebody who was in an area that just was overwhelmed with what they had and had an inspection and they couldn't get to it, that they could actually go apply for help specifically to get that done. I don't know if that's what their goal is or not, but
Right.
it could be
Which
a really
that
helpful
would
thing.
prevent them from getting dropped then, like
Yes.
the bill was saying, and maybe insurers, preventing insurers from leaving the state if they know that there's a way for, we do have a lot of people that live in very small towns in the mountains all throughout Idaho, and they may not have the resources to be able to, cut the brush down and do what they
Right.
need to keep their fire insurance.
Right.
So I guess that could make sense.
But I mean, it's what I thought was so interesting about that article is we do have wildfires in Idaho, but we're not as populated as other
Right.
places, and but our loss of structures has been very minimal.
Right. So
So-
that was kind of one of the arguments against it was like,
Mhm.
of course you can say, yes, Idaho has very bad wildfire seasons sometimes, and it does. We get the smoke here that sits in the valley from it,
Yeah.
but it's not in areas that are highly populated. And so then do we really need this, to cover the risk? Just because we have wildfires doesn't mean we need, to spend taxpayer dollars or something like that to help with this. So, well, that's just something to keep your eye on. I mean, that's just something that will come down the pipes, but it does show that the insurance companies do have their eye on Idaho. It's not life as usual for the last forever where nobody recognizes Idaho and we completely do our own thing. It's what's going on in the nation is starting to affect things in Idaho. And, those policies, protections, all those things are going to kind of come into Idaho. And, our population will get bigger. We are that community in Valnova in the foothills. It's supposed to have, I can't remember the exact number, but something like 10,000 homes. Avamore is growing, and I'm sure there's going to be more massive communities like that in the foothills. So they are forward thinking to when we have hundreds of thousands of people that are actually living in the foothills, 30 years from now, maybe Idaho actually will have something and be a little bit more proactive, which would be great for Idaho instead of reactive. So we'll watch that. We'll see what happens. Well, Sharon, this conversation has been awesome. I learned a ton. I'm so glad that you were here. So thank you so much for being here with us. Any last words? Any last, notes for everyone?
No, just don't be discouraged. You still can be insured when you buy a property in Idaho, but be realistic as to what your risk is and know that, your premiums are going to be based on that but that you can be covered.
Right.
So,
It's still going to be less expensive than at least what I know my clients have been seeing in Texas, Florida, in California. We're significantly less than that.
yes.
But, not in a bubble and unaffected by the rest of the things that are happening. So I will put Sharon's contact information in the description below. If you'd like to talk with her about insurance in Idaho, you can get a quote or ask her any other Idaho insurance questions that you have. Of course, if you're thinking of buying or selling a home in the Boise, Idaho area, we are here to help, and you can contact us at our website at summerastonrealestate.com. You can find all kinds of information there, get free guides like a free relocation guide. You can follow us on Instagram and get Boise information there too. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.